Hey, this is Adam Kruse, owner-broker of the Hermann London Real Estate Group and host of the St. Louis Realtor Podcast.
And this is Shannon St. Pierre, a realtor at Hermann London and co-host of the St. Louis Realtor Podcast.
Before we begin, we just want to say that we are realtors, which is different from someone who is simply an agent. The term realtor identifies a real estate professional who is a member of the National Association of Realtors and subscribes to its strict code of ethics.
And even though it's called the St. Louis Realtor Podcast, this show is for everyone who's interested in real estate. Buyers, sellers, realtors, HGTV watchers, everyone.
So if this specific episode isn't exactly what you're looking for, go through our past episodes and I guarantee you'll find a topic that interests you.
And if there's a topic you want us to cover, email us at podcast@hermannlondon.com. That's Hermann, Hermann, London.com. And we'll talk about it on an upcoming episode.
Thanks for listening and enjoy.
Live from the rooftop of the Hermann London Real Estate Group in beautiful downtown Maplewood, it's the St. Louis Realtor Podcast with Adam Kruse and Shannon St. Pierre.
Welcome, everybody, to the St. Louis Realtor Podcast, live from the home offices and the office of the Hermann London Real Estate Group. I'm your co-host, Adam Kruse, and with you today is my other co-host, Shannon St. Pierre, Realtor Extraordinaire.
Hello.
And we are super excited today because we're going to talk about house hacking, and who better to interview than Alicia Sierra, Realtor Extraordinaire, stand-up agent, Twitter influencer, house hacking expert, Alicia Sierra. Thank you for being here with us today, Alicia.
Well, thank you for having me, Adam and Shannon.
I love this subject. This is probably one of my favorite subjects.
It's so interesting, but Alicia, if you don't mind, start us off by just telling us, what is house hacking?
Well, house hacking, I'd really love to know who came up with this term. This term, but it's basically when an owner-occupant takes a property, buys a property, and lives in it, obviously, as an occupant, and hacks it up to rent to other paying tenants, whether it be a single family and they rent the rooms, or up to a 4-unit where they rent other apartments, at least initially if they're going to use a traditional residential loan, but we'll get into that. So it's an excellent way to start, as opposed to just buying a house, which would be, for most of us, a liability. When you hack a house, it becomes an asset, because it either should at the very least greatly subsidize, if not cover, your nut. In an ideal world, a house hacker would actually cash flow.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. It can be a single-family house with roommates, or you're saying, or it can be a multifamily where you're just renting out the other units.
Mm-hmm.
And the main goal is to cover your mortgage, interest, and taxes, and
hopefully maintenance too.
And maintenance too.
Yeah. But the ultimate house hack is to actually put money in your pocket after expenses.
So you're getting paid to live.
So you're getting paid to live.
I love that.
So there's, that is a very simple concept in and of itself. But after having represented a number of house hack buyers, and sold a lot of investment property, I think there's a next level way of doing house hackery, if you will.
Hackery. Oh,
house hackery.
I think that's a new word, but I like it. Hackery.
Hackery, as opposed to whatery. I think house hackery, because when I talk to prospective clients, I've started taking this, whether they're out of state client, obviously they're not going to live in the property, or a house hacker. I've started to get into a conversation about a big picture plan. So yes, you have a short-term plan, but what you do big picture gets either a better start or not as an ideal start if you've already thought a little bit ahead.
Okay.
In terms of the strategy of where you're going with things. So, so if we start the beginning, and ideally a first-time home buyer will be a house hacker. So the first time you buy a house, when you're a house buying virgin, if you will, there's a lot of grant programs, as you guys know. There's monies to be had that you will never have a crack at again as a first-time buyer. And a lot of people have the misconception that those special programs or money, actual physical, granted money, are only income driven, but there are a lot of programs and opportunities that are available to any first-time home buyer, right? So I think for a house hacker to both purchase for a house hack and take advantage of a first-time buyer loan program and or money grant program that's just even next level if they can line up all of those things to work at once.
I think that's a great idea. I don't know that I've had any clients combine them. I've had clients buy like a duplex to live in half of it, rent out the other half. I've had clients use the first-time homebuyer state programs, or there's several different kind of programs out there, but I don't know that I've ever had anyone combine them. I think that's actually a really super smart way of doing some things. But like you said, back to your hackery, it's also got to be a long-term plan. You've got to kind of think through that, because those loan programs, you have to be in that house for a minimum of 5 years. Otherwise,
some of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Some of them you do. And that might not be the best way to go. Yeah. Some of them, or they only forgive 20%
per year. Every year.
So you might be okay with it.
Yes, it's granted. Correct. So
you might be okay with paying back a portion of it.
Right. But I think also 5 years goes by so fast. I think some people think, oh my gosh, 5 years I have to stay here. I'm like, that's a blink of an eye. Trust me.
Well, it might not. It might not be the best thing to not buy another house hack within the 5 years, but there's also first-time home programs, home buyer programs. For example, have any of your clients used a credit union 100% financing?
Yes.
So that, now the credit union may not let you use it on a 2 or 4 unit. You might have to only use it on a house.
A single family?
But you could find a single family that's better suited for a roommate situation. For example, it might have a finished walkout basement, and it may have a floor plan where there's a allowance for more privacy. So that's great for a young house hacker. It's ideal.
I'm so glad that we're talking about this today. I was just going to say real quick, I'm really glad that we're talking about this today, because I'm surprised. I still talk to people. I was talking to someone yesterday who still thinks that you have to put down 20% to buy a property, So there's a lot of kind of misinformation out there.
There's a lot of misinformation. I get a lot of interaction on Twitter when I talk about the financing, because I'm constantly amazed at, it's like they should have a home buying course in high school, and how little people know about buying a home in general, but they know even less about mortgages and what tools are out there and about credit. So, I'm starting with my 18-year-old now, building credit so that when he leaves college, he will have any number of choices because of credit depth will have been established. But that's a whole nother podcast, but it's all, part of the house hackery strategy. So the main things, I think the main starting points at the beginning of the conversation are what financial tools are available to you, the buyer, if you're going to start, house hacking. So the best program may be 100% financing program, but it may limit you, might tie your hands. Where an FHA loan program might have a lower interest rate, mortgage insurance, but you can buy up to a 4-unit building. I've had a house hacker who who bought a single family. And in her case, she had 2 roommates already lined up. Like she already had how much they were going to pay and who they were. And they were personal friends. And this was a person who was like in their first year as a professional. So it was kind of, it was ideal. You know, she didn't want strangers. She didn't want to share an apartment. You know, she wanted to find a house that would work with the 2 people that she already knew. It's a great way to go. And she knew, you know, the likelihood that they'll live with her a couple of years at least, because they're all just starting. They're all very early 20s. And she used a 100% financing program with a local bank. So it was like win-win-win. So I think that there's a lot of cart before the horse before the cart, you know, kind of tension there. Like going into it, really knowing not only what the financing tool you have at your disposal is, what it may or may not limit you as far as, you know, if you could buy 1, 2, or 4 units, but also what your living situation tolerance is going to be. That's something to keep in mind, like as a landlord. So recently, I just closed like a month ago, owner buying a 4 unit. And, you know, I suggested that maybe because he's going to have to give notice, which is something else we'll talk about. You know, you have so many days to move into the property as a 4 unit. So they're on month to month. He's going to have to give notice. So I suggested maybe you want to distance yourself and not have everybody know that you're the big bad landlord, kicking people out, raising rents and that kind of thing. So I think it's best to think about all of these issues ahead of time, up front, before you invest a lot of time and money and effort, and, you know, as opposed to finding the perfect 4 family and then start thinking, oh, I think I'm a little uncomfortable with this landlord thing, or I'm going to feel bad, or am I able to enforce rules, or am I a softie? You know, all of that has to be considered before the first purchase.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. There was a situation I found myself in when I bought my first house, and I think other people probably find themselves in this situation or have to consider this. So I'd like to get your perspective. I bought my first house, and I had friends move in, as, you know, they were my tenants, we were roommates, whatever. But the kind of the assumption that some people seem to have is that they should have paid. There was 2 of them and 1 of me. And I think the assumption was they were supposed to pay a third of whatever my mortgage was as their rent versus us coming up with like market rate for their rent.
Or even
if pay that
below market, it still might be more than the 30 of your mortgage.
Yeah. And so I was thinking, like, it's not fair for you just to pay a third of my mortgage necessarily, because if I put down 20%, my mortgage would be less. What does that have to do with you? You know? So how do you kind of coach people through the idea of charging like a market rate for that room versus, you know, you're my friend, you should just pay a third of my mortgage?
Well, I don't know if it's my role to coach them as so much as to raise the issues that they should address before they enter into the situation that, you know, that they've established, especially if you're going to own or occupy a house, because you probably aren't going to want to lease that room to a stranger.
Right. But your friends don't need to know what your mortgage payment is necessarily, I'm guessing, right?
No, they just have to agree to whatever they're going to pay monthly. I think that has to just be agreed upon.
And I think, but I think where our role could come in is telling them what market rate is for renting a room. So I think it's not necessarily coaching. It's not necessarily telling them information. There's no rule of thumb, but here's market rate and go from there. And I did the same thing as you, Adam. I had a friend, I bought my first house, had a friend move in. And it was the same. It is interesting because it's the exact same philosophy. It was like, oh, I should be paying the X amount of the mortgage. And I was like, I was naive. I was 25. I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I look back and I'm like,
are they going to pay X amount of repairs? Yeah.
Yeah. Like if the air conditioner broke, were you, putting that bill on the countertop with a little divided by 2 on it, you know?
Right. Yeah. So that is the thing. So whatever it is, it should be established and it should be clear and in writing. Just because it's your friend doesn't mean that you don't need a lease agreement, because Lord knows if marriages can go south, roommate situations can go south.
And they often do. I mean, I'm so grateful. We're still friends to this day. And even after, you know what I mean? So, because I think there is a time limit, even when you buy your own house. And I think that goes into your point, Alicia, is your time frame and thinking ahead is that sometimes, and what I find is that people go, I've even had people do the house hacking and they go, I'm ready for my own space. So, like thinking out, like what happens now.
Right. Because if you get an FHA loan, you have to live there a year. So
minimum, but I've never had anyone like come to me in a year, but there's got to be some amount of time that you're living there. I mean, if it's not a year, it should probably be at least somewhere close. I mean, you can't move the next month. And I wouldn't advise that anyway. If you're planning on moving, I would say let's talk about something else, a different plan.
In terms of the financing, I always if someone's looking to buy a house hack because they're wanting to become an investor, and it is the best entree into it. I call them my time machine talks, because like if I could go back and talk to younger me, this is what I would tell me, and this is what I'm going to tell my kids, so if because I didn't know, the first place I bought, I had no idea. They asked me for a piece of paper. I gave it to them. I didn't really understand, and I didn't have a realtor who really explained it to me. If you know what the financing is in a big picture, then you can be super strategic. For example, if you know that you are, as an individual, you can only get 10 total Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loans, and these loans have the best terms as an owner occupant, more so than an investor. And then you can put a trajectory down. I mean, maybe you have like a 10-year goal for you would like your cash flow to be in 10 years. And then, life happens and stuff. So all we can do is plan it based on what we know now. But you can plan out a trajectory that really fast tracks cash flowing in a way that doesn't happen when you're not house hacking. For example, you can only have one FHA loan at a time. So unless you plan on selling the first place that you use FHA with to have the small down payment, you're not going to be able to use that small down payment loan again. However, it doesn't mean that, maybe you can't use a construction loan that would convert and put yourself in a position to refi the second one and at least recoup your cash back. You can plan on banking all the cash flow from the first 4 unit you bought to help save for your down payment on the second one. So the second one, you have to use a Freddie Mac product, for example. You might be, if your credit qualifies, you might be able to do as little as 5% down or 10% down. So it's back to what you were saying, Adam. There's a myth that you need 20%, and it doesn't even mean you need 20% on the second one.
Right.
So I think that there's a lot of analysis and some math and planning involved, but it's really powerful if somebody, can also get a good enough deal on the first one to refinance out so that they can use an FHA product, and perhaps they could use a 203K loan somewhere along the process, and be building equity and cash flow as they use this. So if someone's young and they have strong credit, and they're in a good lending position, and they have got the tolerance for moving a number of times every year or 2 years, through most of their 20s, for example, it can really, really put you in a position of wealth building, and no other way. I just can't imagine. I mean, it's really an amazing move, but it can get really screwed up if you don't really understand, I think, the financial tools at your disposal. You can kind of limit yourself in a way, not unknowingly. Does that make sense?
So the beauty of it is that you can move in, buy your place with low or no down payment. Mm-hmm. You can essentially live for free or as close to free, or maybe even make money to live there. And then if you wanted to, then you could move and buy the next one, is what you're saying, and like keep house hacking and sort of build a portfolio of properties that you own and keep having to being able to put down these small down payments because you're going to move into it.
Right. You could finagle it with a number of well, at least, I mean, small being 0 to 10% should be very, very doable. And if you put yourself in a position where at least you have a chance at having an equity position in the not too distant future, you can refinance out and get that mortgage insurance taken off. Because you're always going to have that expense, as you know, when you put less than 20% down.
So what would you say is some of the, what is holding people back from doing this? You know, you talk to people and do they not want to have roommates? Do they not understand it? Or do they not like to think about their home like an investment, or what's kind of holding people back from doing this in your experience?
I don't know if they're held back so much as I think it's just, there's just two kinds of people, you know? There's people who, you know, and I write about this a lot, just generally speaking, buying a house in general doesn't make sense for everyone, you know? Some people want more flexibility. They want to be untethered, you know, and they just are repelled by the concept of the responsibility. Well, really, the only reason to buy in general, if you're not going to, as a liability, is because you simply cannot rent the space that you want. You don't even necessarily need it. You just want the space and location of the house that you want is not affordable as a rental on the open market. That, you know, so you're going to buy. So there's a lot of people who just cannot, they're not going to conceive, like you said, they're not going to conceive of real estate where they live having anything to do with property management. Like that, I think that's one of the reasons that we have so much demand for turnkey properties now, because those buyers don't want maintenance. And also, and I think you probably agree, we have buyers that are buying a lot less house than they could actually afford on paper.
Right.
I don't see people nearly maxing out
that's smart.
their pre-approvals because they, you know, I think it's that generation that lived through the crash as kids and saw the stress on their parents. They saw the burden that the house became, and so they just don't want, you know, they don't want that. But some of them react by just buying a small minimalist turnkey house. And then other people's reaction to that, I think, is if I'm buying property, I want it to be generating income for me.
Right.
You know, so, you know, and then the third thing is just to reject the concept of owning property altogether. Just, you're the guy the house hacker is leasing to, you know, you're that girl or that guy.
Yeah. I can understand both perspectives because there was like a 6-month period where I rented an apartment, you know, it just made sense for me at the time. And I will never forget, in the dining room, there was like these huge cracks in the ceiling and the place was obviously settling or something like that. And the feeling of not having to care about that, you know, not my problem was exactly. So interesting. You know, because if that was my house, I'd be looking at it. I'd be calling a professional. I'd be worried about it. I'd be thinking about the solution. But since I was a renter, I was just like, who cares? Not my problem, you know?
Yeah, I know.
But obviously, I
nice
understand.
If you have a good landlord, you know, it's not always the best financial decision. I think that's a myth. You know, it's not always the right thing for you at the right time. Makes sense. But if somebody really looks at real estate as a cash flow and a wealth building tool, I think that being a serial house hacker is definitely the smartest, you know, absolutely the smartest move. But you can't be unrealistic in your pro forma. That's probably going to be one of the I think the biggest mistakes that are made. And I think it also.
What do you mean by that?
I think over optimistically projecting what the cash flow is going to be, I think,
Oh,
and not being conservative enough. Even when I present cash flow properties to clients, I probably have one of the more conservative cash flow analysis spreadsheets, because you have to play it out to a worst case scenario.
uh-huh.
And if it plays out somewhere in the middle, it's probably where it's going to play out. If it plays out the best case, great. But it can definitely, just like regular home ownership, it can turn into a burden if you don't have comfortable reserves and you mitigate your risk, but you are realistic about risk being part of it.
I'm proud to hear you say that you do take, especially when you're helping clients, you take that kind of the conservative approaches on your spreadsheets and your formulas and stuff like that, because that's exactly what I think is the best thing to do too, and the best approach for your clients to take.
Yeah, because I can't, I'm responsible for the information I present. I'm not responsible for the outcome, because I don't have control over the ultimate outcome.
Mm-hmm.
But you just have to play it out to the worst case scenario. I mean, I see it happen now with some of the clients. This will sort of segue into this portion of it. Some of the clients with the vacation rentals. I mean, I think it will bounce back, but this is definitely forcing a pivot.
I guess specifically Airbnb and all.
Yeah, short-term furnished rentals. Yeah, in general. They're definitely having to pivot, and you have to be prepared for that when you go into that. So a house hacker, for example, a lot of people will rent their walkout basements as vacation rentals, and it's awesome because you're going to get 3 times the traditional lease with 0 of the roommate drama, ongoing roommate drama. And it's easy to self-manage. It's easy because you're right there, but you're not attached to anybody. So that's great, but don't count on that, because it might not work out, and you might have to pivot back and find more of a long-term situation. So that that's an example. But yeah, I mean, when you add all the more reason to house hack when you add the short-term furnished rental into the mix, you can even accelerate the whole process and increase your income. But you have to always ask yourself, what if? What if the house is damaged and I have no income? What if you're renting your basement and your basement, something happens in your basement, a fire, flooding, whatever, and then that income is gone. So you have to play those things out, and that's a big part of it. Especially when we're young.
If I was going to start and I wanted to house hack and I was going to take the single family approach and have my college buddies move in with me or whatever, do you think that it's important that I buy a house that I could afford without any roommates? Or do you think, will the lenders even let me buy a house that I couldn't afford without the roommates?
Well, in my experience, the lenders, unless you're a seasoned investor, they don't count the rental income.
Uh-huh.
And it's part of the debt ratio calculation. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, they'll take your debt that you service per your credit report and divide it by your gross income, and there's a ratio that you have to meet, but they're not going to take projected rent unless you've been a landlord for, I think it's at least 2 years. Even if you're buying an owner-occupied multi that has leases in place, they'll review the leases, but they're not going to count the lease income.
So that's kind of a safety net that I won't even be able to buy a house that I couldn't afford without my roommates.
Exactly.
If I'm doing the single family house thing.
Right. And they're going to want a certain amount in reserves. And I get that anybody can give the bank what they want to see and then turn around and spend it. But I would definitely recommend keeping at least 6 months of reserves to cover your living expenses, just in case you have an income interruption, because the rental income should be a bonus, and it should be in a catapult financially, but not something that you have to rely on.
Yeah.
Mortgage.
So is there kind of a criteria? Do you think that does it matter? Like, is it best in a 3-bedroom house or a 4-bedroom house? If I can, the more bedrooms, the better, or have you found kind of a sweet spot there?
I don't know. I think it just depends on all the factors. How much does the house cost? What's the condition? Is it turnkey? Are you not spending, are you not spending any of your available cash? What's the layout? And I think that a house hacker really has to honestly answer all of those questions. There's no point in setting yourself up for total and utter misery, I mean, if you have a house or a job that has, bonuses and other opportunities that can earn you money, I don't think necessarily you're dedicating your time to being a property manager. You might be stepping over $1 to pick up a dime. Those are questions that you should ask yourself. Like this client that I just sold to, he's in sales. He's a very orderly person, and I think he's going to be able to detach himself. But I asked those questions. I was like, "Are you sure you're not going to be a softie? Are you sure you're going to be tough? Are you sure it's going to be worth your time?" Like he's doing everything right. If you're going to self-manage, definitely have an attorney, prepare all the documents, and make sure that, don't go to Office Depot and get a lease, like a boilerplate lease. He's doing all of those things right. But some people don't have the emotional stamina to take flack from somebody who lives where they live, who is their neighbor. So those kinds of things are important, and also the time factor. Is that time per hour less than what you could make otherwise in whatever your job is, however you earn your living? I think those are questions to ask. But as far as the ideal setup, it's just going to be property to property. So it's going to be financial questions, also lifestyle questions. Like, you're not going to want to keep a roommate if you don't want to figure out after the fact that it makes you don't have enough private space to yourself in the property that you chose.
Well, what do you mean by time? So if I buy a house, I got my 2 college buddies move in with me. What kind of time do you think I'll be spending that I wouldn't be spending, for example, if I was the roommate?
Well, like maintenance and repairs. So that depends on, should you really buy a totally turnkey property? Or, one of my clients bought a house, great price. There's definitely equity, and there's definitely projects. I mean,
okay.
It was fine, it was livable, it passed inspections, etc. But there's absolutely some cosmetic projects there, inside and out. So that's going to cost time and resources.
And then you're also talked about kind of like the personality and the ability to sort of be
tough.
tough or whatever. I used to get in arguments with my roommates about what we were allowed to put down the garbage disposal, because I was raised to never put anything down the garbage disposal. And they were just throwing stuff down there.
Right.
I'm like,
your house, your rules. You got to be able to enforce them.
We would argue about that kind of stuff all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the duplex really comes in, because I had the same issue.
Yeah.
Funny enough, with the garbage disposal, my roommate would take the whole coffee filter and just stuff the whole thing down in there. And I'm like, it's not a paper shredder. It's
what?
Oh, that's a hot mess. No,
I know. I was just like, oh my gosh, please don't do that. But but I think that's where the single family, people talk about, like, I don't know if I want the roommate, or they're used to roommates, especially if they're coming out of college, but then they might be
right. But I know people with singles that do like traveling nurses and short-term furnished rentals in the basement and stuff.
Yes. So I think that level that I think is really attractive. But I think one of the most attractive is the whole duplex. You have your own space, but you're able to kind of house hack, and ideally maybe buy something in a price point where the rent covers at least the majority of the rent the mortgage.
Well, I'll give you an example. Now I got one under contract, and it's in the 230s, and the upstairs apartment is 3 beds, and the downstairs apartment is 2-bed. So he's going to rent out the second floor and occupy the first floor.
With no roommate.
With no roommate.
Which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
And the upstairs rent in that neighborhood should be about $1,600. So
Sweet.
it should cover at least the PITI.
Yeah.
And then if he gets a girlfriend or somebody like that to move in, he can charge them rent. And
Oh
then
my God. Adam probably got girlfriends just to save money on the bill.
No comment.
But I do find the biggest challenge is like when I try to talk to younger individuals or individuals that are buying the first time, that they love the idea, but where it kind of stops is trying to rent out. They're like, I don't even know where to start to rent it out. How do you go doing a lease? How do you, and I'm like, oh goodness, an agent can still walk you through that entire process. Like you had mentioned just a few minutes ago that, to get an attorney to kind of draw up a lease, don't go to Office Depot.
No.
Not to necessarily get an attorney, because I know that that's a huge, a big barrier, a big hurdle for, someone that's young trying to just figure all this out. You can also use an agent to rent out your
To lease
other.
it. Yeah, you can.
To lease
Or
it,
you can
and then
have-
you can self-manage from there. Or I do have a friend I think is really interesting. They just rented a house. It's not here in this city, but they rented a house, and right next door is the owner. He lives in the house next door, owns both of them. And he goes, she said specifically that they have a property manager that they deal with. The property manager said that the owner does not want to have any kind of communication with the renter.
That's good.
How
That's
did
good.
they find out that he lives next door?
So
I
my
know, but I
client,
said that. I go, but it's right next door. How can you not have some kind of?
I think that's really smart. So my client is not. He's going to hire a manager.
Yes, and
So
I
even though
I
he's living
understood it,
in
and I
the
kinda-
two-family,
yeah. So I think it's kind of smart. Takes out the personal aspect, and if you
Yeah,
can't really be tough, then it's a great way to go.
it's a great way to go, because I think that if you're going to have people in your actual single family, especially, I think it's good to talk to an attorney, because there's going to be things and issues maybe there that an attorney will think of that a leasing agent isn't going to know. So even if you hire a leasing agent, I think it's good to talk to an attorney just about your specific situation, especially if you're living in the house. I mean,
we have to agree with it. We always
get people out, even house guests.
we always encourage people to talk to an attorney.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a great scenario that you should talk to an attorney, because I think that that's your own personal house.
You gotta know squatting laws and stuff. I mean, there
are, right.
You have to work, is unlikely situation, yes. But again, you should work these things out to worst case crazy scenarios, because, I mean, this is where I'm talking about, the time machine. It's like I've been in some really, not so ideal situations. You just you don't even think about that. I think, especially when we're young, we just don't think about those kinds of problems and issues.
Right.
And the other thing is it's just a habit building. Again, if you are house hacking and it's because you're thinking long-term wealth building through real estate, I think you're developing habits. So I'm like, you should operate now like you're going to be operating. That's just my 2 cents. They can take or leave. Hire the professional to hire a property management company now, because you're going to move and you're going to get the next one. Unless you're trying to make self-managing a full-time thing, but that stress point in between, can be more than what people anticipate.
Yes.
So you're saying, why have the costly mistakes and then hire the attorney or the property manager? You can hire them up front.
Because you think, oh, I don't know, why should I pay them 10% a month or whatever? Well, I think you shouldn't pay just any property manager. I think you should interview property managers, do your due diligence, get very detailed about what that service includes, what the extra costs are, etc. But, really do a good self-assessment. Because if you're, a grown professional person developing your career at the same time, this can really hold you back in ways that you don't even anticipate. The
mental stress in of itself.
Mental and hours. The hours.
Yeah, so never mind the hours. Yeah.
You just don't, everything, you don't really figure these things out, I think, until you're, not to get too, philosophical about it or whatever, but you don't really figure these things out until you're, let's just say, older. Let's not talk numbers when it comes to age.
Experience.
Experience. I mean, because, your life progresses before you know it. You have, a whatever it might be, a pet, a significant other, a child, whatever. And now you're backtracking. And I just think it's better to set it up for the life you're building rather than the life you have, because it can also impede that, because everything just takes a minute, But
right. I do think
it's a lot of minutes and they add up pretty fast. And
and I do tell people, I agree with you. Like, with age does come wisdom for sure. But what I know now, which is easy for you and I to say, I wish I would have done it differently if I were your age. And
I wish I would have done it.
I wish I would have. But what we know now is that when we come against those challenges, whatever they are, I mean, there's a whole string of them, we somehow just figure things out. So you're not going to have all the answers. It's to your point, to kind of think through some scenarios that we can possibly think of, to kind of, set them up as much.
I'd rather have it in place or have done the due diligence.
Yeah, so I think you should do the due diligence, but I always tell people,
I want to hire a manager. I know who
you'll figure it out. I always think people, I'm like,
putting that stuff in place in panic mode is difficult. So that's why I'm like, at least know who you would turn to if you decided to turn to that professional, because if something happens in your life, it could be anything. It could be a career opportunity, it could be a loved one that gets ill, you have to take care of, and now you can't handle this. It's better to have done the due diligence at the very least, I think, and then you can just make that call. Now you're not backtracking. Now you're not interviewing managers, reviewing management agreements and stuff. You have it ready to pull the trigger. So, this is, anybody who could buy a house can hack a house, but to be really into hackery, it takes definitely due diligence and some preparation, and I think that's where professionals like ourselves come into play, because we either have our own good or bad experiences, or we've seen it work out really well or not as well for clients, and it's just things that only the streets can teach, like I like to say. So if you ask yourself all these questions and do all this preparation, like, it can be good in any case, but it can be really, really great. I mean, like, just incredibly powerful tool. To be a serial house hacker is house hackery, I think, to do it well and as smoothly as possible.
I think that's awesome. Yeah, because I don't think that I think it's awesome that you work with these clients, and I'm sure it's few and far between, have that long-term plan to work on that next level of hackery, of going, I'm going to move every other year. I'm not going to buy real furniture. I'm just going to buy some blow-up furniture. Yeah. And my blow-up are going to deflate, and we're going to move on, like every, to really kind of build it. And within like a matter of 6 years, you can, even less, way less technically, but you totally set yourself up, completely set yourself up. And then,
especially if you're willing to do it, like I said, a 203K.
So you brought up the 203K. I think it's a cool product. People kind of like the idea, but I have almost no one ever uses it.
Give us a quick overview of that, Alicia, for the listeners.
Well, okay, so a construction loan means that you go and borrow money from the bank, obviously for construction, and then typically it has to be refinanced, which is, even refinancing costs money. Obviously, anybody knows that the advantage to taking on a renovation in general is that you're going to have equity. Otherwise, if you don't put yourself in a position to where you're going to have equity, so in other words, if the same property would have cost you $300,000, you're all in for maybe 220, 225. So you have a comfortable equity position in that home. A 203K loan is FHA's sort of version of a construction loan. And what's nice about it is it converts to a permanent interest rate. So higher risk while under construction, the bank will charge higher interest rate. But instead of having to refinance, reclose, it converts to a rate at the end of it. You can't, it's not a sweat equity thing. That's something we can come back to in a minute. But how sweat equity can work, where you put your own skills and back into it, which there are house hackers who are weekend warriors and enjoy that. But because you have to hire an approved contractor, and it's all up on the up and up. But you get an equity position. It saves expenses on refinance. It's still low down payment. So that's what's so great about it. It's a great way to start if somebody has a stomach for it. If not, that's what I mean about understanding the financial tools. You can only have one FHA loan at a time. So if you think by the second one, you're going to need a 203K loan, that means you should use a conventional loan program for your first house hack so that you're enabled to use the 203K loan for your second. This is why good relationships with the right realtor and the right loan officer are so important. A banker who will take the time to strategize with you and collaborate with your realtor and enable your goals and help you determine what they are by asking you questions, like help you articulate them and map them out. Sweat equity is another option, but all that means is, you're buying a property that's livable, but has a lot of opportunities to add value. So we call it added value opportunity. For example, the perfect place to put the second bathroom, a basement that could be finished, a kitchen that could be upgraded as a project. This is the situation with the young man that I just sold a 4-unit to. It was the perfect scenario for added value. It's a mid-century building. If you're in a market where the housing stock is old, like we are in St. Louis, mid-century building is a great find because there's a poured basement, as you guys know, instead of a stone basement. There's a lot more you can do with the basement and a lot fewer problems potentially with a poured basement with moisture, et cetera. So in any case, it had the same landlord since the 80s. Wow. And we're all, okay, boomer, let's not raise our rents.
Oh, no.
Same rents. One of the tenants had been there since 1993, for goodness sake. So he's going to move into the worst looking unit, which is the smart way to go. One of them had a small fire and was redone, and the other 3 are in various stages of outdatedness or havoc. Not in the systems way, but cosmetically, original kitchen, that kind of thing. So he's gonna move into the worst looking unit and improve it as he lives there. And once it's improved, rent it at a higher rate and then move to the next.
Nice.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. So he's not borrowing money to improve the property per se. He's gonna put his back into it. But he had to move in within 60 days. It was fully occupied. So people, they think when they shop, they cannot buy a fully occupied building. You can, but at least one of the leases has to be on a month-to-month. So he had to, shortly after purchasing, give a 30-day notice. So that was the extent of the requirement.
So how do you choose who you're kicking out? Because I get that question. Like, if it's it
was easy for him because
how do I choose?
The worst unit was also the slow payer. So the guy pays, but he's a slow payer. So it was kind of like a double whammy. So that's what he's giving. Yeah, but it's
what does slow payer mean? He pays late?
He always consistently pays late. He pays, but he pays late consistently. So
just a headache.
Yeah.
And so again, Alicia, so you come against, because that's one of those things too, where you come and you find a building that's been kept up system-wise, maybe not cosmetically, which to me, I'm like, that's your dream.
That's the dream.
So, but it's fully occupied, and in this case, 4 units.
Yeah.
Out one, so we pick the slow pair. What do you do with the other tenants that have been there forever and pay $200 in rent?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
the market rate is, $800 or something.
I don't think he's going to want to mass.
Yeah. What do you do?
I don't think he's going to want a mass exodus. I think what he's going to do is once he's improved the unit he lives in, then he's going to give notice to the next and rinse and repeat, in his case.
Okay. Yeah. So do you ever tell them to give them the option, like, here's your market rate, here's market rate. Sorry, it's a $600 difference, but it's that or.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that he will give them the option to up their rate.
Why not?
Yeah. To what
I would too.
In its current condition. I mean, he can't.
They can qualify, yeah.
He can't get the full market rate. I mean, we're talking about their 50 cents on the dollar for what it would be after being modernized, but he could definitely justify some kind of increase, some kind of prorated increase. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. That's why I thought he should hire a manager. I think it's going to be very uncomfortable, awkward.
We have a tenant where
that perfect scenario for that property manager, though. Hire the bad guy. And you're like,
yeah.
But
I checked in with him and he said it was going well. I don't have the full skinny yet, but yeah, he said it was going well. I think that the other piece of this is just because you're a serial house hacker doesn't mean you can't also buy investment property at the same time. So, when I talk to an investor, whether they're house hacking or not, besides having them understand what conventional lending options are in terms of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, what that means, it means 30-year fixed. It means lower rate, et cetera. I also want them to understand what commercial lending is. That means lending to an LLC. And I want them to understand what portfolio lending is. That means a local financial institution has loan programs that they hold in-house instead of selling to Fannie or Freddie. And they're typically 2, 3, 5, 7-year fixed rates, and they're on adjustable rate mortgages or balloon terms. So you have to know that you're either going to sell that property or be able to refinance that property in that time frame. So at the same time, especially when people start really young, we talk about all the different tools and the tracks that they can get on. So I'm like, just because you're owner occupying doesn't mean you shouldn't create an LLC, create a bank account for that LLC, start to build credit in the EIN for that LLC so that you can develop a fourth option, which is a business line of credit. Because now you're going to have way more opportunities and options. For example, you could buy a 4-unit that needs added value, and you could use that business line of credit to lend to yourself the improvements needed for that, for the added value projects. Raise the equity, refinance it with a Fannie or Freddie product, and then move forward. It just gives you all the options. Because, especially if you're really into it and you get that bug and now you're learning your market, you've chosen a realtor, not unlike the 3 that you see here, who knows a market knows your market really well, can give you intelligent rent guesstimates before and after, can advise you on what improvements will give you the most bang for your buck, etc. You're going to probably be recognizing other opportunities and want to be in a position to take advantage of them, regardless of the fact that you're not going to be house hacking. So it makes a lot of sense at the, from the beginning, if you start setting yourself up for all the different lending options to be at your disposal.
Love it.
A fifth, if you want to, which is a whole nother conversation, is, some whole life policies where you can lend to yourself off of a policy that you funded, which is going to be way more cheap and lots of more options when you start in your 20s, than when you're a woman of a certain age, let's say. So you're going to have a lot of those options at your disposal if you start early. It doesn't have to be, it's a long game, just because you start now, it could be 3 years before you're eligible for that $100,000 line of credit. But you can't, you're going to look back, trust me, you're going to look back and go, dang it, why didn't I start thinking about that, So once you get that house hack and you move in and you're settled, I'd start building those bank relationships and building that business credit and looking into that whole life policy, because it can be two-track. You can use your 10 loans or any number of them as an owner occupant. Might not be all 10. You could be a confirmed bachelor today and a married guy with a kid of 6 years. You don't know. That's the thing. When we're older, we know that you don't know. That's all.
A married guy with a kid whose wife doesn't want to move that much.
Exactly. I know your house hackery game has been curtailed, Adam.
Yeah.
Do you have anyone that uses their 401k?
What's that?
Do you have anyone that uses
I have
what 401k takes a loan out?
I have not for house hacking. I have a client who actually is taking advantage of the COVID 401k loan.
Oh yeah, really? Already? Man.
Yeah, he just
jumped on that.
And going to start portfolio building. So instead of taking a penalty, withdrawing his 401k, he has taken advantage of the COVID law that has better terms, better tax terms. I'm not a tax expert.
An accountant, right?
But I think that's a good way to introduce the whole COVID topic. I mean, we would be, the viral elephant in the room, if you will. That there's obviously a lot of talk about market opportunities right now, just in general. But that is a tool. I don't know how long it's going to be at the disposal of 401k account holders, but it definitely seems like it's worth asking your accountant or financial planner about it. About using those funds to help you advance your investing goals. And on the lending side, the FHA lending in general is tightened. So, the commercial lenders have come to overall a screeching halt. They're either not lending at all, or they went from, we'll do 90% of your rehab or 80% of your turnkey purchase to we'll do 60%.
So really?
That's really, I'm sure it'll come back, but that's kind of like on hold. But again, it doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to a commercial lending broker,
yeah,
and find out what needs to be in place so you're ready when it does open back up. And then on the FHA front, we know that it had opened up to as low, with other criteria in place, as low as a 580 score. And now I know they won't go under 620. So if it's limited, and I'm sure probably if you're in a 2 or 4 unit, there might be even more, guidelines that you have to follow. But information is power, so it's better to even if you're just thinking about it and it feels like a pipe dream, it's better to know what's up right now.
Talking.
And start moving down that path and start educating yourself. But as much as, without getting yourself into analysis paralysis state, as great as YouTube is and blogs are, again, there's things only the streets can teach. So I would definitely start, if someone's thinking house hacking, I want to get into house hackery. I think that it's good to start reaching out and having conversations with your professionals and building that team, because anybody who is a real professional, career realtor, loan officer, banker, will be willing to give you, a consultation call by courtesy. Will be willing to correspond with you and answer your questions.
On that note, do you mind telling the people how they can get a hold of you?
Sure. You were kind enough to put my Twitter handle at standupagent. That's a good way to reach me. My email is really long, thanks to you. So we'll go with my phone number, 314-325-9565. You can text me or DM me, and you can find me on Facebook, just my name on Facebook. The catfish photo, the black and white catfish photo. Like, is that her? Yeah, it's me. Anyway, you can DM and I'll respond, send you, send me an email and stuff like that. Or if you want to get on the list, here, let me give you that.
How do I get on the list?
It's on my profile on Twitter too. Text cashflow to 314-310-4199. That's 314-310-4199. The word's cash flow. And we'll get you up on the list. So I can run, but I can't hide.
I love it. Now, do you mind if I ask you the 5 questions we like to ask all of our guests?
Oh, geez. I wasn't warned. Okay.
Okay. So it's a chance for people to get to know you, the real, the personal you side of you or whatever. Who lives under your roof?
I have a husband and 3 teenagers.
And
2 dogs.
You have a new dog or something? 2 dogs?
I have 2 dogs. Yes. The OG, the Chihuahua. And,
okay.
And the new gangster.
Okay.
I don't know.
Where are you your best?
Where? You mean where am I located when I'm at my best?
No, you can answer it however you want. Where are you your best? Like, what aspect of your life, whatever?
I think I would say as a mom, because I call myself a smenter, a combination, not too smothery, but I'm definitely noticing and involved, and I like to have a mentoring approach to raising my teenagers.
Just a side comment about that. Following you on Twitter, you do sometimes make posts, or is it on Facebook? You make posts about kind of mom-related stuff. Mm-hmm. And, knowing your kids, especially knowing, I guess, your oldest one, I have to say that you've done an amazing job as a mentor.
And
it's really interesting to see the kind of things that you're teaching your kids and the different perspectives that you take on the world and employment and money and all that kind of stuff, So
I'm not trying to change who they are. I'm just trying to help them be the best self-sufficient,
teaching them like really interesting stuff.
Version with space to house their mother in a couple decades.
Couple decades, okay.
I'll take a tiny house or a walkout basement. Just saying.
What is your favorite blog or podcast?
My favorite blog or podcast?
It's kind of like, where do you like to get your information, basically?
Well, why do I forget this guy's name? Tom Bilyeu, non-real estate related. Has
Tom Bilyeu?
Bilyeu, Bilyeu.
Okay.
He has an amazing podcast. I'm low tech, so I'm on YouTube with these.
Love it. Okay, 2 more questions, Alicia, and then we'll let you go. I know you got some hackery to handle today. What is your guilty pleasure?
Oh, reality shows. I'm bad.
Any good ones?
Because if I'm having a really bad day and I feel like I don't have my shit together, then I can watch 90 Day Fiance. Or if I feel like I haven't done the greatest as a mom, I'm like, for Summer House, I'll be like, my child would never behave like this.
You watch Summer House? I can't believe it. I like Summer House.
A couple of the Real Housewives, and this is my insomnia work in Vanderpump Rules.
Okay.
Talk about, whatery.
Yeah. All right. Lastly, who is your mentor and how have you thanked them?
Who is my mentor? It's funny you should say that because I don't know that, I really had a mentor in the probably the sense that you mean. And I think it's so important to have one. And that's one of the things I'm helping, especially Leo, my oldest, who's going to be going to school. I'm like, we need to find your mentor, the person who's where you want to be. But I would say I've learned the most from my dad, may he rest in peace, as far as like really setting an example for generosity, work ethic, curiosity, a thirst for the importance of education, and being a reliable family man, and a real rock for the people around him. So,
did you have a chance to thank him?
I did, actually. Yes, I did. Especially in the last couple of days of his life. Yeah, I was there.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I did. He did good, and I let him know he did good.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Any last minute questions, Shannon, you want to ask Alicia, or Alicia, anything you want to say before we wrap it up?
No, thank you so much for your time. This is an awesome subject.
Thanks. And I just realized that I cussed on I'm glad you're not subject to FCC.
That's all right. That's all right. I like it.
You cussed? I didn't even catch that.
I said the SHIT word.
Oh, see, that's in my normal everyday. Like, I don't even know
doesn't
the
count
word anymore.
I know. I mean, this investor world is not for the faint of heart.
All right, everybody. I appreciate you guys very much. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. And we'll see you all in the next podcast. Take care.
Bye.